You just made a great decision clicking on this video. This may be the best fluke fishing episode we've ever produced on Next Drift. I'm going to give you my top secrets for catching the biggest doormat fluke that swim in the ocean.
All know me, know how I earn a living.
Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Next Drift. On this episode, I'm going to share with you my best fluke fishing secrets. Things you've probably never heard before, never thought of before. I really hope you enjoy this episode and play it back a few times. As always, please click that like button, click the dislike button if you want, click the subscribe button, click that notification bell. Let's get into it. Before we begin this episode, I want to take a moment and thank all of our newest Patreon members. We just started our Patreon subscription service this week and we had an overwhelming response. We offer 3 different membership tiers, the Fluke and Freak Ultimate, Fluke and Freak Doormat, and Fluke and Freak Guggen. All of those are filled with exclusive content, videos that we don't show here on the YouTube channel, as well as weekly reports, GPS coordinates, tips on where we're going to be fishing and what we're going to be using for any particular trip, and also access to our Next Drift Live podcast where you can submit your questions and we answer them right online live. So please take a moment, subscribe to our Patreon service. The description is in the link below. And again, I really appreciate all the support from everybody. You're what makes Next Drift special, and you all make it happen. Thanks again. So let's jump right into this. Secret number 1, lobster pots. Now, before you jump all over me and say, what are you crazy? I want you to hear me out on this. I hunt down areas that have lobster pots on them. It could be an area that has a few scattered around, or it could be an area that has a whole bunch. The reason that I want to search out areas that have lobster pots is for a few reasons. Lobster fishermen are doing it for a living, so they're only going to put their pots where they think they're going to catch the most lobsters. The other reason is that the type of bottom that the lobsters are using is very similar to the type of bottom that fluke want to find and use. Lobsters are also predators and scavengers, just like fluke. Areas that have lobster pots, and especially a lot of lobster pots, are probably pretty productive, and those are the areas that I really want to spend most of my time in. The other reason is most people don't want to get anywhere near them. These types of areas are prone to getting snagged, and people don't want to lose their lures. But I'm not worried about that. The old adage is, if you're not getting stuck, you're not doing it right. So I'm not afraid to fish around them. I hunt them down. Most of the times, you're going to find that areas with lobster pots are underfished, and they either have lots of numbers of fluke or really big ones. The other reason that I hunt down lobster pot areas is because draggers aren't going through those areas. And again, just like if there's less pressure from recreational fishermen or party boats, there's also going to be less pressure from the draggers, and those areas are going to have more fish in them. One of the ways that you really want to fish around lobster pot areas is to figure out the drift direction. A lot of times you can line the boat up in a particular way. If you have a trolling motor, it's even easier. But if you don't, it's okay. You can position the boat to where you're going to drift past the lobster pot areas or just next to them. When the tide changes and the buoys are set up in a certain way where it allows me to actually drift through them, I'll do that as well. And you can find a gap in between the lobster pots and actually drift through those areas that may have never seen a lure before. These are some of our best drifts. And yes, you're going to get hung up on the lobster pots here and there and probably going to piss off a lobster fisherman, but the reality is that these are sometimes the most productive spots because the areas between the buoys nobody has ever fished before. It also pays to kind of learn how lobster pots are laid out. There's different ways. Some pots have a single buoy and others are laid out in a string where you have 2 buoys on each end, and you can pretty much pick those out when you go and look. If you see a long line of of buoys and they're just one after another and they're all the same color or they have the same numbers on them, chances are it's a string of lobster pots. The other reason I like fishing around the lobster buoys is because you can get a lot of useful information from them. I can figure out the drift speed, I can tell when the current's starting to pick up. You can also tell the direction of the current. A lot of times when I see a buoy like this one, I can pretty much surmise that the drift speed's going to be anywhere between 2.5 to 4 miles an hour. That's when, I might have to put the bucktail down and try a fluke spoon or something like that. It can also tell you when you need to either downsize or upsize the weight of your lure. The buoys themselves can tell you so much. When I see a buoy like this, I know that the fishing's going to be really tough. We're at slack tide. Anytime you see a buoy like this, it's time to really downsize or maybe have a sandwich. This is not the way I want to see a buoy when I pull up to a fluke spot. This to me is the perfect buoy. You have a little bit of current behind it, it's tipped on its side, and I can pretty much gauge that the drift speed or current speed is going to be anywhere between 1.0 to 0.5 miles an hour. That's the perfect drift speed for the bucktail and fluke. And that's going to lead us into our next secret. Big fluke secret number 2, drift speed. What's the perfect drift speed? To me, it's 0.7 miles an hour. And I'm staring at the GPS waiting for it.
Well, it's not dead low yet. No, still 0.7 miles an hour.
Huh. So at low tide, what happens? The bait stops moving, or?
Yeah, the water stops flowing and they just stop feeding. But then, as soon as the tide comes back in again,
That's where we're at now?
we're almost there. Yep. But this is with the 0.7, 0.8, 0.9 is where we want to be speed-wise. Biggest fish we've caught are right about now.
What do you got?
That's a big fish. Yep, that's a big one. Here, Dean, want to bring that up? Yep.
Easy,
See,
Mike, easy.
Oh, God.
that's a big fluke. A fluke?
I hit something.
Oh yeah.
Oh, boy. Taking line
That's
out.
a big fluke. I told you. That's when we get the big ones.
Big in the boat.
Take your time. Take your
Tell me
time.
what you need me to do,
I just
man.
want you to reel him in. Just take your time. If he wants to run, you let him run. Yep. That's a big fluke. That's a double digit. Yep. Take your time. If that's a fluke, it's a double digit. Yep, that's a fluke. Wow, can you pull your line in, Steve, please? This is a monster. Told you, this is when we get them. I just said, we're right in the heart of it, and I said, 0.8. This is when we get all the big ones. That's a monster. You take your time. Don't just, reel. Make sure you just keep nice and steady reel. Don't let the rod not be bent. This is a big one. Yep, you take your time. Yep.
That fish is fucking testing you.
Remember I told you how they stay glued to the bottom?
Yep.
Yep, you gotta kind of lean, turn your body this way. There you go. Lean them right up here. That's a big boy. Nice steady pressure. Don't get excited. Can you move that rod, please?
Yep.
This is a big one. Yeah, look at the size of that one. Lead it right to the net. Monster! Monster! Wow! Good for you! Good for you!
You're a good teacher, man.
Wow!
Nice job,
That's a
Michael.
big one, buddy.
Yeah,
Nice job. That's what we came out here for.
Hey.
Woo!
Right there.
Oh man, that's a big boy.
This was a great trip a few years ago, back in 2022. You can go back in the Next Drift episodes and see it. That 0.7, 0.8 mile an hour drift speed is magic. Almost all of the double-digit fluke that we've caught in the last few years have been right at those numbers. So really pay attention to your GPS. When you see 0.7, 0.8, pay attention and get ready. It's big fluke time. Secret number 3, a slower presentation. This is something I've experimented with and noticed over the past few seasons. Many of us are accustomed to the rapid jigging movement when you're fishing for fluke. But what I've noticed is that the slower presentation, a slower jigging motion, has produced the biggest fish. It doesn't always catch numbers, but if you're looking for a real doormat, slow down your presentation. Let me show you how to do that. So this clip is from our good friends over at Jigging Jerks, Captain John Halkias, and he's out there with his famous buddy Doc. And I asked John if I could use this clip because it really showed what we were discussing with a slower presentation and how to accomplish that. I want you to take a look at John's rod tip right there. It's a slow pitch rod, and you can see how it has a pretty good amount of flex in it. And one of the things that accomplishes is when you're jigging the bucktail, it's actually moving the bucktail a lot less than it would be if you were using a stiffer action rod. I've also noticed that by switching to a lighter action spinning rod, you can also accomplish this. But that slow movement of the bucktail, opposed to that rapid, fast jigging motion, has produced many, many big fish over the last couple seasons. And I've really tried to pay close attention to it. This year, I'm going to be really focusing on using a slower jigging motion or changing my equipment to something that has a softer action tip rod. That slower movement, I really believe, appeals to the bigger fish. Let's compare the difference between a rapid jigging motion on the bucktail and a slower, softer presentation. The first animation is of the rapid jigging motion imparted on a bucktail. This is a great way to catch numbers of fish. You can certainly catch big ones as well. But this method, I've noticed, produces, like I said, numbers. But when we're talking about catching doormats, we need to appeal to a big fish. Typically, big fish don't want to expend a lot of energy chasing down prey, and they also don't want to compete with the smaller, more aggressive fish. That's where the slow presentation comes into play. Look at the difference between the faster jigging motion and the slower, more methodical approach. Which one do you think would appeal to a bigger fish? So those are 3 of my biggest fluke secrets. We're going to post a couple others up on the Patreon page, so make sure you become a member. I hope you found this information useful. The next time you go out, try a couple of these things. Look for the lobster pots. Try to find some water that, nobody else has fished or doesn't want to fish. Slow your presentation down and make sure you pay attention to that drift speed. I promise you that 0.7, 0.8 mile an hour drift speed is magic. Anyway, I really appreciate you watching. Please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. We'll talk to you real soon. Take care, everybody.